It's that time of the year where I'm doing a lot of process work because businesses want to make sure that they enter the new year with maximum acceleration, maximum results, and minimum risks. Hi, I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. Part of strategic relationships is making sure that the components within your process or the activity that you perform are all working together with minimal friction. Minimal friction is important because you want to keep the forward momentum of your successes and not be concerned about these temporary changes. So the world around you is constantly changing. The economy is constantly changing. The people involved in organizations are constantly changing. How do we make consistent the outcomes or the outputs of our efforts? Well, I believe that's through process and project management. So your processes, you may have 3 to 4 key processes. Your processes produce a certain output. Now, you may have started a project to create that output initially. But once you've created that output, if you need to repeat the activity, you document the processes that you've taken or the steps you've taken to create that outcome, and you build it into a business as usual process. This is very important. If you want consistency in outcomes, if you want the maximum utilization of resources and effective utilization of resources so that you create results with fewer deficiencies, then you're ultimately going to end up with a few processes. Now, every process is going to create an output or a deliverable, but it's also going to address certain risks and concerns you might have when creating that product. So I work with a lot of highly complex environments. I work with facilities management, IT services, operational risks, processes that handle data. All of these processes have the same thing in common. There are activities that produce a deliverable. That deliverable has certain quality elements. That deliverable has certain regulatory rules. So, for example, if you have a mailing list, there are certain regulatory rules associated with the privacy of individuals on that list, the association of the individuals with each other, as well as the topic that list covers, and also how you interact with these people. So there's canned spam. It impacts how you can email people. And by the way, this is mostly for commercial emails, but it does impact those connectors or producers like we have here at Inside Strategic Relations, who may be making a large number of contacts outside their organizations every day. Maybe you're a salesperson, maybe you're an influencer, maybe you're a political figure, and you've got lists of supporters. Your processes have controls which address risks. What are these risks? Well, we have reputational risks. We have risks associated with financial losses. We have risks associated with just problems that can come up. Now, here's what I want you to do. When you're thinking about the risks of what's going on, the challenges you might face in a process, the obstacles that might keep you from getting the outcome you desire, as you're documenting the steps that you take, you want to create what are called controls that identify or actually prevent or detect those risk conditions. Now, we aren't going to worry about worst case scenario because the worst things could happen. There could be a global fascist empire that tries to stomp out everybody and reduce the Earth's population, and aliens come down from Mars because they found us probing them. And we can always come up with a worst case scenario. But I'd like you to leave the worst case scenario for fantasy and fiction. Because what happens in the world is there are thousands of competing conditions, and we want to focus instead on the probable outcome based on the conditions. So in the case of creating a mailing list, you may only have 2 or 3 steps. The first step is to identify who you want on the mailing list. Step number 2 is to offer something of value so that those people will raise their hand and join your mailing list. And step number 3 is the maintenance of that list and how you use that list. What risks are involved? Well, I just mentioned the regulatory risks of privacy, communications restrictions or permissions, and it goes down the line. How do we address those things? Well, we have a do not call list. We have a do not email list. We maintain our list in one single location so that if a customer asks to be removed from the list, we can easily remove them from the list. What is the outcome? Well, the outcome isn't the list. The outcome is a relationship with customers that if you make an offer to them, they will buy, and you now have a continued relationship, a repeat transaction or repeat purchase. All of these things can be mapped out. You can use a flow chart. You can use a decision diagram. You can use a RACI that has the high level work breakdown structure, and that's a list of the task in a hierarchical format as tied to the roles and responsibilities, the people who will be doing the work and what is their role in that. All these things can seem very complex. So here's the secret. Here's the secret that's going to make it all worthwhile. Always have on one hand a working document, and on the other hand, whatever structure you're going to put your steps into. Let's say you're developing a project. You have Microsoft project, and you're simply going to make an outline of the activities that you're going to do, and you're going to put those activities in some kind of order with predecessors, and you're ultimately going to have kind of a time frame that things are going to get done. On the side, you want to have a working paper that addresses and captures the reason why you make specific decisions. First off, the working paper will identify a challenge or a risk or concern. So if somebody on your project says, hey, look, in developing a mailing list, if we have the wrong company holding that list, they could steal the list. So we should build an in-house product. You can say, great, write it down, confirm that what you wrote down is their concern, and then move on. Now, this is a tricky part because groups want to discuss these things. And most of the high-performance people that I work with, they work in committees and groups, and they work in organizations. They don't just do this by themselves. So now you're developing a project as a small team. You brought together the resources, the expertise, and there's going to be lots of opinions and a lot of feedback and a lot of tangents. Capture them in your working paper. Okay. Somebody says, we should not be doing email marketing because there's a new California Privacy Act, and just having that data in our facility is going to require us to take these extra steps, and we don't want to take them. Why don't we just send letters? Well, they may not realize that sending letters has the same data, and you may not have an email address for the person, but you have their postal address, and that's a different set of rules that come to the privacy, personal identifiable information. And ultimately, you can again acknowledge the concern, capture this concern in the working paper, and then implement your control accordingly. And you may find out that the email privacy, the telephone do not call list, the do not text list, for example, the do not mail, the privacy of addresses and confidentiality when there's a domestic claim. All these types of issues could be handled in a single solution, an elegant solution, which is kind of a privacy console. And most customer relationship management systems have some sort of privacy console. Go back to Mail Order Manager, all the way to Infusionsoft, all the way to Salesforce. You have some way of flagging customers as do not contact this individual, or to flag their privacy. But you aren't going to solve that in the design of the process. You're not going to solve that in your initial high-level process overview. You're not going to solve that when you're doing kind of a risk analysis. But you do need to know about it. So again, you use this working paper to capture these key points. And once you've captured these key points, you can now come back and reference as you write rationales, as you write other stuff. Now, I fully understand that the majority of the people listening to this podcast are saying that we don't do anything complex enough that we would write it down. And I would say that's a huge mistake. I've worked in environments where for example, entering a data center, we're escorted by armed guards. Okay, so I'm working in a government facility. I'm a lowly computer repair guy. I come into the space. They take away all my equipment. All I have is what's in between my ears, and they hand me the new tools to go do the work. I remove the piece of equipment. I bring it out, put it on the table. I hand them their tools back. And then by the time I came back, they have review the replacement equipment. They've actually gone through it and take a look at it. And you might say, well, if they're technically skilled enough to look at the new piece of equipment, they should be technically skilled enough to install it. Nope. They actually had a procedure in place. if I was going to replace a hard drive, I had to bring a hard drive that was still in the box, original packaging, and I would put it on the table, and they would verify it was in original packaging by opening it up and plugging it in to make sure it's empty. I would bring the other piece of equipment out, and or maybe it was a drive or something that I'm replacing, and their environment had hot spares, so I could literally just pull the drive out. Now you're thinking, well, they could pull the drive out, couldn't they? No, the procedures were in place so that not only the right drive was pulled, but the exchange made sure the custody of the drive itself was not restricted. Now you might be saying, well, Justin, look, come on. I don't have a secure data center. We don't have armed guards. All we have is a cash register and product on the shelf. Well, what is your procedure for end-of-day cash out? So when that cash drawer is closed out at the end of the day, what is the procedure to ensure that the money in the cash register makes it to the bank? See, you might have a camera over top of the cash register to see both the transaction and to see the items being purchased. You may have store security so that people don't take items off the shelf and take them out the door. You may have a secondary camera that's hidden that monitors the front desk should there be the event of a robbery or a altercation at the cash register. You may have facial recognition on that software. And by the way, this is all stuff you could buy at Costco. You can buy security systems that do facial recognition and a cash register and still need some kind of procedurals so that at the end of the day, you know the money in the register makes it into the bank. So you may have the cashier closing out the register, handing it off to a shift manager, and the shift manager puts it in a deposit safe. And then at the end of the day, Brinks comes by and takes it out of the safe and takes it to the bank. See, our minds believe that what we're doing is simple because of familiarization. You are familiar with the process. You know the steps. Why do we need to write it down? However, standard operating procedures in an environment improves efficiency because you can have somebody who has not done the process before take the same steps, check their work, and create equivalent outcomes. And that's the power of the optimization. That's where processes transform into outcomes. They improve efficiency and they lower overall risk. Now, I've heard now in businesses, you're going to have more processes than in your personal life, but I've heard of people who have a checklist that they use for when they clean the house so that when they clean their house, they understand how much time it takes to clean the house, what items need to be as far as supplies. So when they're ready to clean the house, what supplies are there. And then ultimately they discovered that checklist could be given to a vendor, and that vendor cleans their house with equal or even better efficiency than them taking the time to clean the house. At all levels of your personal and business life, there's going to be an opportunity to transform what you do into some systematic approach. The documentation around that can be as simple as a working paper and a simple overview. The working paper gives the details of the reason why, and it's for reference, and the overview gives the instructions to someone who's going to perform the task. If someone were to look at and ask questions about the instruction, you're going to have enough background information that you'll know why it's a certain way. Ultimately, those things get you started, and you can get into more detail with risk rationales, risk matrices, control audits, all that good stuff. But it really, again, depends on the complexity of your environment. But do not discount the importance of documenting the reason why you do certain things. You never want to get into a situation where you're just doing something because it's routine. You don't want to do something and not want to change it and then not know why you're doing it in the first place, and then not knowing if a change would improve it or not because there's no metrics. There's a big rabbit hole here, folks, but if you've got questions, contact me at www.InsideStrategicRelations. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, where we talk about critical thinking, optimization, creating better results faster with fewer resources, and how to transform business relationships into profits guaranteed. Understanding your processes, the risks associated with those processes, and how you address those risks, and using simple tools to document your reason why. It's going to go a long way. It's going to make a huge difference to what you're doing. And I want to hear your success stories. I want to hear about your challenges. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. Thanks for listening.